this monotony of everyday life.
Yes.
The kind of like waking up, living your 9 to 5, going back, sleep, rinse, wash, repeat. And this monotony, it cries out for a savior, right?
Yes,
it cries out for a moment to interrupt it and basically say, no, there is actually more to this monotony. Many consumers of pornography, I suspect, and I think they are looking for some kind of novelty, some kind of interruption to the repetitiveness of their life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Naked Gospel, where we explore and imagine and re-envision what it means to follow Jesus and to actually know his gospel with our relationships, with our affections, and with our bodies. I am your host, Shane O'Neill. Today, we are joined by Dr. Matthew John Paul Tan, which is just a cool name. Having a cool name has given him the superpower to also bestow cool names on other things. So when I was sick with COVID 2 months ago, I came across his article, Pornography and Christology. He also writes at Awkward Asian Theologian, which just makes me smile every time. I am very excited to hang out with him and speak with him. We're going to process this article that he wrote. There's a lot of transition going on in his life, so he'll be able to speak about that as well. It's very exciting stuff. I suppose I do want to throw out a disclaimer in the beginning just to say that this will be a very nerdy conversation, but it won't be nerdy for nerdy's sake. I want to bring this down to earth a little bit because it's very important. I've spent probably the last 4.5 years of my life trying to learn how to actually be present. I found that when I was bored, I would go to my phone. I would go to like Amazon that would curate the things that I liked so that I'd buy them. And then I'd totally buy them. When I was bored, I'd just go there. I'd go to YouTube, I'd go to Facebook, Instagram, all sorts of things are grabbing my attention, and I would let my attention go there. And I realized that fantasy is so much more than just kind of just lust. It's about where we live, what we allow to dominate us, and what we inhabit. And I just so badly want to be present to people. I so badly want to know life. I want to care more about the friend that I regard as a sister. I want to know her hug better than I know or care about the fantasies that play out in my head throughout any given day. And so what does it look like to actually be present and to live life? I think a word that'll be important for us is with in a tactile way. What does it look like to actually interact and care about people instead of exploit people? It seems like a lot's at stake, right? So I'm excited for this conversation. So if you see it kind of taking place up here, this is why it matters. This is like down on the ground. This is how it impacts us, because it's teaching us how to be human, how to actually be human. But enough of my spiel. Thank you for being here. If you like this episode, share it with somebody you think would benefit from it. Comments, subscriptions, all those things matter. We just like that you're here. And Matthew, thank you for being here. I am excited to play with you. This is going to be awesome.
That's great. Thank you, Shane. And thank you for having me on your show. For sure.
Well, like I said, there's a lot of really cool transition taking place in your life. Would you mind just sharing that with us?
Yeah, sure. I have until recently been working in Sydney, but by the time this episode drops, I will take up a new position as an academic dean of a small little rural seminary in a rural diocese known as the Diocese of Wagga Wagga. So
another cool name. Place. Cool names just follow you, bro. Yeah,
great name. So just for the sake of context, Wagga Wagga is the Aboriginal name for the place of many crows. So that's going to be my next transition there.
Yeah. Are you pretty excited?
I am. I'm going to be sad to be leaving Sydney. It has been my home for almost 10 years now, but I'm excited for a new chapter.
Dude, I saw this, let's see, a research formation officer. What is a research formation? It sounds really cool, but what is it? What does that mean?
I think that may have been a typo. So what I actually am doing currently for the Catholic Archdiocese of Sydney is that I do bits and pieces of research for for a number of bishops, and I also do formation for the university chaplaincies.
That's cool.
Out here in Sydney.
That's cool.
So it's a very varied role.
Yeah, yeah. You're the guy that gets paid to just read all day long.
In the manner of speaking, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's cool.
And
that's really
also
cool.
Get other people to read.
Yes, yes.
If I don't get other people to read, then I'm not doing my job.
Right on. I like it a lot. I want to know about this article. I loved this article. You did such a good job. It's engaging. It's provocative. I've read it like 3 or 4 times now, and every time I go through it, I'm learning something new. So I suppose I want to know why you got interested in this to begin with. Like, how did you fall into this idea? Like, when it comes to pornography being pornography, but Christology, kind of the study of the life and the work and the nature of Jesus Christ. So pairing those two things, I don't imagine there's really not a lot of work on it, so people don't just stumble into it. So how did you?
The initial area of interest that got me eventually getting interested in pornography, if that's the right phrase of use. Anyway,
yeah.
But was actually my research in pop culture. So I'm currently doing a research project, a book-length project on theology and pop culture. So it was working off an intuition that said that there must be more to pop culture than simply the trade of goods and services, because there just seems so much of it. How can you possibly get so much and still not be satisfied?
Yeah.
The more I started digging into that, the more it became apparent to me that pop culture was actually more than the trade of trinkets, trade in in kitsch. It was actually a trade in images that are ultimately spiritual in nature.
Yeah.
So that
That's good.
Pop culture is actually not just about buying and selling stuff. Pop culture is actually about a form of spiritual formation. And what got me interested in pornography was a sort of intuition that pornography is now starting to make its way as an aspect of pop culture. With the increasing normalization of pornography in various manifestations of pop culture. So part of me was just going, oh, okay, so is the same thing that is happening in pop culture, i.e. the spiritual formation aspect, playing out in pornography as well. And that's what really got me started into this particular research thread. And what you are seeing in that article there is just one aspect of it, which was the Christological aspect of pop culture. I think that does that answer?
I love all of that. Yeah, all of that is rich. Right. Because that's its own rich journey, and it really is becoming much more mainstream. That is to say, pornography is culturally. I have been to Europe a few times, and I've been shocked at different points to even go to the bathroom, and televisions in the bathrooms would just be playing pornography. And like growing up, all my friends watched porn. All of them. Like it wasn't even something shameful. It was just something everyone did. It was very standardized that way. So yeah, I agree with you. It is becoming normalized. It is becoming, and if culture, as you define it, is kind of a transaction of images, and since images impact spiritual formation, culture and spiritual formation go hand in hand. I think that's a really tight argument, and I really like it, and it's something I want to sit with. That's why we call this. That's why this podcast is called The Naked Gospel, because the counter image to pornography is a naked man dying on a cross for you, right? Like nothing will turn you off and sober you faster than just staring at his broken and naked body. As he has pain and compassion on his face as he looks at you, like that's the counter image. That's the counter icon to pornography. And
right.
And so even this podcast is oriented and geared towards a lot of what you're saying. Can you just take a minute and articulate what the article thesis is?
Okay, so the article's thesis is sort of a response to the tendency by a lot of well-meaning critics, in particularly well-meaning Christian critics, to focus on like two aspects of pornography. One is the fact that pornography has an addictive quality to it, and the other is that there is a virtual aspect to pornography because of the fact that pornography is now online.
Yeah.
So my response was kind of like twofold. The first one was that it's all well and good to look at the addictive qualities of pornography, but the only reason why it is addictive is because there is a cultural power of pornography that many of those critics may not necessarily address. Because probably it's because that they think that the culture is in and of itself neutral. So it does not have any formative power. And so my argument there was that there actually is a cultural dynamic taking place that is informing the addictiveness of pornography. So that was the one aspect of the argument. The second aspect of the argument relating to the virtuality of pornography, or the fact that pornography has now gone online, it kind of ignores the fact that it's not just the platform of distribution of pornography that is virtual. My argument was that pornography itself is virtual, precisely because pornography's stock and trade actually is not sex. That was the thing that this was the counterintuitive argument that slowly formulated in my head, was that in reality pornography is not about sex. It's actually about a virtual representation of sex, or a possibility of sex.
That's it. Yes,
and
that's good.
And when I started, focusing on that, then the two aspects kind of like came together with this one argument that at the heart of pornography is not just a cultural, it's not just a cultural power. The cultural power in itself is actually underpinned by a very powerful theological message and a metaphysical message, right? A message that basically says that that what is virtual or what is possible is better than what is real and actual, and that this chasing of the possibility or the fantasy will save you.
Yeah, no, all of that is good. I do apologize for those who are watching. It's Matthew is 16 hours ahead of us, so he's gracious enough to get up early in the morning and spend time with us. The day is ending here, so it looks like the glory of God is blasting me in the face. It's the sun, and I'm Irish enough that I might actually get sunburned, but I just a little bit of clarity there, so you're not trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Matt, I remember reading an article. I don't remember where, but it was maybe a year ago, and it was evaluating the big porn conventions that happen in Las Vegas on an annual basis, and it was pointing out the really beat up irony that you could have prostitutes half a block away from these conventions, but these conventions are flooded with men primarily, who don't actually care about the prostitutes. They're there for the porn, right? And so he's making a very similar point that porn isn't about sex, right? It's about this fanciful living in these a fantasy of possibility. And I actually like that. We'll get into this. So this is a bit of a getting ahead of myself, but if you start with possibility and try to get to actual, you won't get there, right? And like these are men who are living in possibility, and when sex was half a block away and cheaper than the convention actually costs, they didn't buy it. They didn't want it. That wasn't the point. They wanted porn, and a lot of us aren't willing to admit that to ourselves. A lot of us so much of my generation is single. So it's hard to even play out. It's like almost a thought experiment. But I do promise you, like the minute you try and get married, you think like all your problems will go away because you'll have, be able to have sex. But it'll seriously jack up your marriage if you go into marriage thinking that sex will save you from what pornography is drawing out of you. And that's a podcast for a different time. But I think all of those go to reinforce the things that you're communicating right now.
Yeah. And just to add to that, there was another article that I came across. I can't remember off the top of my head what the article was called, but it was looking at, I think it was looking at, young people in Japan specifically. And one of the growing trends amongst young people in Japan is that Japanese young people are not just not interested in getting married. The frightening thing that I picked up was that for many young people, or the growing number of young people, they aren't even interested in sex. And that is, I think, not just unique to Japan. I think this is actually something that cuts across a number of societies as well. It's not simply that we are not interested in getting married, but that we are also, to a growing extent, not even interested in sex.
Yeah. It does seem like porn culture is eclipsing hookup culture. Although there's so much overlap between the two, there is enough dissimilarity to refer to them in two different ways. But with hookup culture, it does seem like we're more captivated by the ability to swipe, the options, the possibilities, as opposed to like finding somebody and staying with them, or like best sex I ever had as they're swiping to find someone else. You know, like it's not about the lay, to use the crass language. It's not about getting laid. It's about praying. It's about moving on. It's about consuming.
That's right. That's right. They want something that kind of even transcends the immediate experience.
Yes, that's good.
And for them, the closest approximate to the immediate experience is the next experience.
Yes. Okay, dude. This could be so, like, we could go on a bajillion tangents, and we already have. This is crazy. I'm already way off my outline. This is awesome, though, because we're touching on a lot of stuff. So, first off, could you define, because you use the word metaphysics a lot, and I don't want to assume on our audience, would you mind defining metaphysics and how metaphysics, like why they matter to actual living?
Okay. So metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that studies what reality is. Essentially, I mean, we all, one of the primary interests in philosophy is actually the study of reality. But then there's a subdiscipline within philosophy that's kind of saying, okay, I know we're interested in reality, but what is reality? Where is reality? How do you define reality? All of those kinds of questions are fall under this subdiscipline called metaphysics. So if you were to look at, the world around you right now, you might say, oh yes, there is I'm staring out a high-rise building outside my window right now, and I say, okay, there's actually literally a concrete reality in front of me. That must be reality. But what metaphysics actually does is sort of say, yes, okay, but is the material reality that is in front of you, that concrete building, all there is to to reality? If you were to sort of like pull the veil back, is there anything underneath it, right? And that's essentially what what metaphysics does. It's looking at what is apparent, taking the veil behind what is apparent, and actually saying what is actually underneath the hood, so to speak.
Yes. Yeah. It's, let me know, because I generally think of it this way, but if I want to know somebody's metaphysics, or if I want to know my metaphysics, it's typically the last answer I can give to why. Like if you keep on asking why enough times, it's like, well, why is that there? And why is that there? And then like whatever the biggest answer that I can come up with, that's what I'm saying is kind of the ultimate picture of what reality is. It's the final answer to my final why.
That's right. No, I think that's a good way of putting it. And you know, the sort of shorthand that you know, that academics like me would use is the idea of ultimate reality. You know, what reality actually underlies all other realities, or you know, what reality helps you answer that last why.
That's good. Okay, that's helpful. So you're arguing that pornography actually has a metaphysic embedded in it, but then also is teaching us a metaphysic, that because you're saying that there's spiritual formation. And when you say spiritual formation, well, why don't you play that out actually? Like when I don't want to take that term for granted. When you say spiritual formation, what do you mean by that? So when like culture impacts our spiritual formation and pornography impacts our spiritual formation, what does that mean? Okay,
so I guess this is actually where you know, where the Christianity and the metaphysics sort of come together, right? I mean, I'm very much influenced by the thought of an Italian priest named Luigi Giussani, who was the founder of a movement within the Catholic Church called Communion Liberation. One of the things that he spoke about was that Christianity, before it is about belief, is actually an engagement with reality. And what Christianity is about is learning to live and face reality.
That's good.
And so that's kind of where the metaphysical and the spiritual kind of come together, right? Yeah. So to go back to your immediate question, spiritual formation does not just exist in a mental or a mental vacuum, right? It's always something that is that kind of emerges out of one's own lived experience with the world. And how you live in the world allows a particular conception of reality to seep into you, even though you're not conscious of it. And what that eventually does is that it helps shape not just how you relate to the world, but how you relate to things beyond this world. So that if you live in the world in a way that is that is, let's just say, kind and full of generosity, that has an impact on not just how you think about life, it has an impact on how you think about the Lord and the giver of life. And by the same token, if you think that if you live a particular kind of life that is brutal, that is where everybody is out to kill you, that also has an impact on how you think about God as well.
I heard I heard a pastor. He was in England, and he went to, I guess, maybe the kind of the Balkan regions, and he was visiting the Christians out there. He's teaching, and he was shocked. He was shocked by how many Christians would just go to the black market to buy stuff. They just go to the black market to buy stuff, and it was seen as a cultural norm. Like for him, it was like, what are you guys doing? Like there are other ways to go about this that are more ethical. It was an ethical thing. And so he really balked at that, no pun intended. So, but then something curious happened where a few of them came with him to England, and they were shocked at how much alcohol they would drink. And they were kind of really, really, that was an issue for them at an ethical level. Both of them were blind to the stuff that was taking place in their own cultures. It was just kind of culturally assumed that these things would take place. And thus it was forming their walks with Jesus, and also what they assumed Jesus would do, what Jesus would allow to be permissible, or or not permissible. Is that an illustration of what you're talking about when it comes to a culture and how culture shapes our formation, and also how it impacts our view of Jesus and what it means to actually follow Jesus?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
And at one level, it helps. The living in a particular kind of culture inculcates certain habits.
Yes.
Habits of the body, and how how your body moves and how your body behaves is not disconnected from how your soul gets affected. Right? I mean, to use Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas said that, I'm paraphrasing, the movements of the body influence the movements of the soul. And so if you live in a particular cultural form where your body is made to live in a particular way, that has an impact on how your soul becomes oriented as well, not just to the world around you, but to God as well.
Yeah, I can't tell you the amount of friends that I have who lament their parent, who become parents and all of a sudden start to lament the story that exists for the workplace. That it's we leave the family for 40 hours every week at least. We can't bring our kids. They can never see that side of who we are. They can't ever see what we're building.
Yeah.
And we have to leave them, and they just know daddy goes away for 40 hours every week, and we don't know what he does, and we're not allowed to go where he goes. And that's just a really kind of beat up story, when it comes to the workplace. And that's in America. In Europe, there are it's a bit more nuanced, and I appreciate that the way that they practice work a little bit differently. But in America, just a really beat up story. So I think that's probably another maybe illustration of what you're talking about, where it's forming us, whether we know it or not. It's like we have a story of what work and parenthood and even childhood, like all these like just what work looks like gives us all sorts of stories.
That's right, correct. And also to make this more concrete for your listeners on the particular topic of pornography, right? What you just illustrated there is a normalization of disengagement. And just think about that for a second, right?
I'm gonna write it down.
In order for you to live out your life as a parent, to live out your life as a laborer, to live out your life as a family man, you need to spend a huge amount of your waking hours disengaged from those very people that your life is meant to be lived for. And that in a way becomes a very concrete manifestation of that metaphysics of pornography that I'm arguing for in the article, right?
That you're wrestling
one
with.
of the implied arguments in the article is that when you actually understand how the metaphysics works, when you understand how the Christology works, we will get to that in a second, but when you understand how those two things work, you find out that these things are not just unique to pornography. They're actually, embedded in a lot of the cultural practices that we see in, broadly speaking, the West, but also in other societies as well.
I'm in danger of enjoying talking to you too much. Let me ask this. So, all right. So we've got the metaphysics. So metaphysics is what is ultimate reality.
Yeah.
And so ultimate reality, and that, like that's not just thought of in some kind of canopy sense. That is tethered directly to our cultural stories, our cultural images, what it looks like to be a man, what it looks like to be a woman, what it means to be human. All these things are being imparted to us from our metaphysics. Yeah.
That's right. And then we are also implicitly accepting it if we respond favorably to those messages.
Right. Okay, so I want to pick up on the kind of the metaphysics of simulation. You say that a few times, and it's almost as provocative as normalized disengagement. So will you walk us through what you mean by a metaphysics of simulation? Yeah. Because you believe that carries a lot of explanatory power at a cultural level. Yeah,
that's right. I'll just flag that I've written about this more fully in another online article called The 800-Year-Old Simulation. Essentially, what, as the title suggests, the metaphysics of simulation is actually not a new thing, right? That's another thread in the article, is that pornography is not something that just comes out of nowhere. It's actually the sharp end of a very, very long process of normalizing simulation. Now, what the origins of that? It starts out in the I think around the 1200s, where in the 1200s, the norm, or the metaphysical norm amongst Christians, that is sort of like regarded, it's sort of like in the background, right? It's in the air that right. Christians breathed in the Middle Ages, was that you had kind of like two things always in operation. One is the actual, right, otherwise known as act, and the other thing is this fancy word called potency, which we can translate to mean possibility, right? Okay. There's always actual things and possible things, and that actual things and possible things always exist in the same thing. So just give you an example, you've got you've got acorns. We don't have acorns over here, but but you've got one explanatory tool is that of an acorn. There's an actual thing called an acorn. You can see it. You can do stuff with acorns. So there's an actuality called acornness, right? Now, so the act of this acorn is acorn. Yes. But you know that an acorn is not just going to stay an acorn. It's going to grow into a big oak tree down the track. So at once, an acorn has two things. It is an actual acorn, but it's also a potential oak tree. Right? So that kind of gives you an idea as to how act and potency, sort of like sit together within every single entity that is lives and moves. Well, even inanimate objects too.
Just for a clarification, sure. In my grad degree, I had to study virtue ethics, and potentiality is used quite often. It seems like they were. The people that I was reading, it seemed like they were regularly pulling from Aquinas. And it seemed like it was kind of an Aristotelian idea taken from Aristotle so I just want to understand the categories, because it can almost make sense two different ways in my head, but only one of them can be right. It seems like it could be you have the acorn, and the acorn has potentiality, and the potentiality is a possibility, or that the potentiality and the possibility are the same thing. Okay.
Like for explanatory purposes, I'm using potentiality and possibility as the same.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah. So every actual acorn is a possible or potential oak tree.
Right. So applied with like virtue ethics, for instance, somebody who's say addicted to pornography, they have the potential to not be, even though at the time they are.
That's right. Well, actually, so we now have to sort of like go further into the metaphysical story to get to that, right?
Okay. Well, we got the acorn down, so continue us on with the simulation.
We'll start with acorns, and now we'll move up. We'll move up in the world from there.
Let's do it.
So while you have actuality and potentiality in the same thing. Okay. What was also in the air in the Middle Ages was that the actual was always more important than the potential.
Yes.
But what happens around the time of the Middle Ages is that there's a kind of reversal of that priority, and strangely enough, all this metaphysical reversal came about over a debate about how one actually speaks of God. So it actually started out as a theological problem, right? How do you speak of God? If God is infinite, how are you going to speak of God using your finite language? And I mean, there's a whole story there. I'm not sure whether you want me to unpack that.
No. Let's not, because it's too fun, and I'll get dragged into it. Yeah. Just knowing that they're inverted because of this debate. Yes,
that's right. So when you so the fruit of that of that debate about how you speak of God with your finite language, the truncated version is that you learn to understand the things of this world as not God, right? So in order for, how do we understand our being in this world? Oh, we're not God. So when you say we are not God, we are kind of metaphysically we're kind of doing two things, right? The first thing is that we are, as you say, inverting that priority, right, between potentiality and the actual.
Yes.
Right? We could be God, right? But we are not in actuality, right? But the other thing that also takes place is that to speak about not being God, so that means the negative or the negation of something,
right,
actually now is given the same level of importance as the affirmation of something, right? So what it means is that not being God and God now sort of like exist conceptually, they exist on the same plane, right? Now, when you start, the metaphysicians will go on and basically say, when you start doing that, when you say not being something is now the same thing as being something, it means that the not being something now becomes, actually, the metaphysicians would say it has being, all of a sudden not existing.
Right.
Not existing has existential weight.
Yes, right? yes, yeah.
So nothingness now becomes a something.
Right.
Right.
So we give existence to negation, to not existing all of a sudden starts to exist.
Exactly. So the negation actually starts to have a substance of its own, right? But not only that, when you see this reversal of the actual and the potential, right? The not existing part now becomes the foundation by which all of us start to actually view the world.
Yeah.
Right. So when you start doing that, possibility, right? The not existing but could have existed.
Yes.
The possibility now starts to become the default setting for how we engage the world around us. Right. And the moment you start talking about how things could possibly be something, that's a hop, skip, and a jump away to actually talking about how a virtual reality can become the default setting on how we engage the world. Right? So the world around us becomes a virtual reality, and that's a simulated reality.
Right. So the possible is the virtual.
That's right. The possible is the virtual.
Whatever we can think up is it's almost the thinking up takes priority as opposed to what exists.
What actually exists, right? So it doesn't matter if something exists, so long as I can think something else exists.
Okay.
Then that's the reality.
Yeah. Even as you say that, you could see that has it has kind of shock waves, because you can see echoes of it in humanism, where it's what we can think up, right? And if we can get to God, you use the mind to prove God. It's like then we realized we couldn't use anything to prove that anything exists, that everything is in fact circular, and so we denied God's existence instead of humbly saying we can never discover truth on our own. Like there was this beautiful moment for humility in that moment, but we decided to just deny that everything exists at all. And I like that because you said that this is really nerdy. All of a sudden, epistemology starts to precede ontology.
Absolutely.
Right. And sort of ontology being what is being, what exists in this sense, and epistemology being whatever we can think up. Whatever we can think up, all of a sudden starts to qualify what existence is. Am I understanding you right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, probably another way to put it is that, what I think now becomes more fundamental than what actually is. So I can think anything.
Yes, that's good.
It doesn't matter if something is or is not it does or does not exist. If I think it exists, then it exists. So that becomes the foundation for the cultural world in which all kinds of simulation, of which pornography is one, come into being.
we can intuitively connect the dots.
Yep.
Would you mind just doing it intentionally, of connecting the dots between this metaphysic and pornography in particular, when it comes to a metaphysic of simulation and possibility? We'll act dumb and say, what does that have to do with pornography?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we are working off this sort of understanding that we are now living in a culture where possibility sort of like supersedes or overtakes actuality. So where the pornography starts to come in becomes apparent when you start looking at you guys are probably familiar with the work of the sociologist of pornography, Gail Dines.
Yeah.
And her book Pornland. So in one of the chapters, I cannot remember which chapter it is, one of those chapters makes a mention about the various types of the various genres of pornography that are present, right? And that part of the marketing of pornography comes from the fact that there are these varieties, several different types of, several thousand varieties to choose from. It would, I mean, it's not as crass as that, but the thing is that it actually is embedded in the way pornography is marketed, according to Gail Dines.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at, the kind of infrastructure of pornography, pornography sort of like sales pitch is not so much about look at the people having sex.
Yeah.
Right. It's actually more about look at the different types of ways that people could have sex.
Yeah. Rather
than actually having sex.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Right? And so if you understand that that's part of the marketing strategy of the porn industry, and that really that's a pitch that works, right? Because the consumers of porn play into that.
Yeah.
Then the understanding that underpins that whole dynamic of the marketing and the consumer's response to the marketing, right, is that there is actually a hidden or embedded belief that what is possible, the possible ways that people could have sex on a digital platform, is actually the base reality for the whole operation of the porn industry, right? So the porn industry is a manifestation of this metaphysics of possibility,
yes.
Right? And it's not just simply because it's online, right? What the online platform actually does is just enable what is the fundamental reality of pornography, which is all about the selling of possibility. Right? It just makes it easier to distribute all those possibilities and make it more apparent to.
That's really good. The selling of possibility.
Yeah.
Now there's it's been striking to see with COVID, with the face masks, it's been striking to see that face mask porn has become a thing. And not just that, it's wildly popular. It's really popular because it starts to level out preference, where all of a sudden it's like she's attractive, she's not, and it levels it out behind a veil of mystery and something forbidden. Right. It's like, I don't know who that is. I can't see her face. She's got a beautiful body. And so there's this attraction. It's the forbidden fruit idea, like all over again. And it's been striking to me because it really just comes down to the mystery of the possibility. And that's why the genre itself is blowing up within pornographic circles. That's
right. And I mean, the cynical part of me, it reads something actually far more sinister in that particular genre, precisely because with the, what face masks also do is that it kind of negates identity.
It dehumanizes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It erases identity.
Yeah.
And by marketing the various forms of possibility that exist within pornography, what also ends up happening is that actual identities become erased.
Yeah.
And so one should not be surprised that face mask porn actually is a thing, because the face mask, or rather, that particular subgenre actually is outwardly putting on display what is an interior reality of pornography itself, which is the erasure of identity, right? So when you erase an actual identity, you can then superimpose any possible identity onto the characters in the video.
That's true. That's true. There's greater anonymity, which gives you more power of possibility.
That's
because
right.
you can embed that figure with any kind of personality, any kind of desire or longing or fantasy for you or whatever it might be. So all of a sudden they become kind of just more of a malleable object as opposed to a human being.
That's right, and this kind of goes, we might be jumping slightly ahead, but what that also does, well, this whole erasure of identity, what it also kind of demonstrates is that when you live in a culture where you normalize possibility as your fundamental default setting, as your default setting as a culture, what ends up happening is that actuality becomes erased, right? In the name of the possible, actual things start to become, not just secondary, they actually start to become destroyed.
Non-existent.
Right? In the living out of a culture of possibility. Yeah.
What, I mean, we're destroying time right now, so we don't have a ton left. It's a lot of fun, but talk just for a little bit if you can, because you say something very provocative, that that pornography has a gospel within it.
Yeah.
And so you use the word messianism. So it has a Messiah-likeness inside of it that attracts us to it, or some kind of promise of salvation. Would you just play that out with us? However much you want, and then we'll start to wrap up after that. But I really do want to hit that point.
Yeah, not a worry. I'll start with with a quote by G.K. Chesterton. He wrote this probably more than about 100 years ago, and he says, "Every time a man knocks on a brothel door, he is really searching for God." And what I'm doing with the article is essentially sort of like developing that that thought, right? The messianism is a sort of a play on a Marxist philosopher named Walter Benjamin, right? He basically said that every moment of our life, we are always looking for a messianic moment, right? And what does the Messiah do? The Messiah is someone who is anointed, as the name suggests, but he also redeems the moment, right? He actually comes in and sort of like overturns or redeems the reality that the person being saved is living. So when I consume pornography, let's just say, right, I'm also, like in every other moment, I'm also searching for that moment whereby what the reality that I'm living in gets overturned or gets redeemed. So what is the reality that is being overturned? It is this monotony, this monotony of everyday life. The kind of like waking up, living your 9 to 5, going back, sleep, rinse, wash, repeat. And this monotony kind of like cries out for a savior, right?
Yes,
it cries out
for
for a moment to interrupt it and basically say, no, there is actually more to this monotony.
Wow.
Many consumers of pornography, I suspect, and I think Gail Dines or other sociologists of pornography might say this as well, is that they are looking for some kind of novelty, some kind of interruption to the repetitiveness of their life. And and if you understand messianism as a kind of break with the repetitive history, right? Then there actually is a kind of, a kind of salvation worked into the pornography. Pornography comes in and basically says, is your life boring? Well, here's a possible way that your life can be made better. Right? And so when your life can be made better comes in, right? That's that in a way is a messianic moment, precisely because it breaks that monotony. But here's the clincher, right? The clincher is this: the whole idea of come submit to the marketing that I am giving you, and your life will get better, right? The whole when you say I promise you a better life, right? In the ancient days, when someone says here's a better life, that is actually the word that is actually used for that kind of message is gospel, right? And what what is sought after is the submission of the person to this gospel, right? So there's several things working at play there, not just in pornography, but in other things as well.
Yes.
That there are things out there that promise an interruption to the monotony, promise an interruption to the normality, that promise excitement, that promises a break, a new turn, a new beginning. All of these things, right, are fantasies of possibility that are promised to you if only you would, you would click on the link, if only you would, give us your credit card details. That is, in a way, there is actually a gospel narrative worked into that, right? And why do we play into this? It's not simply because we are searching for excitement, right? But because we're actually searching for something that transcends what we are normally living, right? We are asking ourselves, is this all there is to life, right? Now, just going back to Luigi Giussani, right? Luigi Giussani says that the moment a person says, is that all there is to life? You're at the threshold of what he calls the religious sense, right? So there's actually something religious at work when a person seeks a break from the normality, a break from the repetitiveness. Yeah, and in a way, the porn industry plays on that. Yeah, so it insofar as it plays on that, it is actually acting as a kind of spiritual formator.
Man.
Yeah. But I'll qualify that by saying that it's not just the porn industry that's doing that, right? The porn industry can do it only because we are now living in a culture that is soaked with this kind of thing.
Yeah, your words are challenging the mess out of my heart. Because even as you talk, I'm like, frick, I do that all over the place.
We are all doing that. Yeah.
All over the place. It is a...
And in a way, that explains why pornography has such cultural power and why it is so addictive. Precisely because it plays on that very movement of the heart. Man,
I mean that lie, because that lie, it takes on a different tone, but it says the same thing everywhere. Because it's to the man who's married, you'd be happier over here. She would make you happy. Right. Yeah. Or for the woman, like that man would actually show you affection. See how affectionate he is? It's a promise of affection. Why don't you come over here? And we're terrorized by possibility. It doesn't, even as you say it, it sounds like it's not just that people are trying to use, it's not just that if you start with the actual, you won't get to the, if you start with the possible, you won't get to the actual, but that people that were actively weaponizing the possible against the actual.
Absolutely. And the moment you live in a world where possibility becomes the norm, you're always trying to live life either escaping from the actual or actively trying to destroy the actual in order to make the actual fit the possibility. And the way this plays itself out, and my favorite example of how this plays itself out is in the increasing normalization of plastic surgery. Because in plastic surgery, what do you have? You have a dissatisfaction with an actual body, and you want it to fit a particular possible image that you have seen. And there's another article, I cannot remember what it is, but there is an article that actually shows the anecdotal evidence that the growing standard by which people are using as their guide for the various forms of plastic surgery are pornographic ones. Many plastic surgeons have clients that come into their desks, put a pornographic image on the desk and says, "Make me look like it."
Wow.
So we are seeing a literal destruction of the actual to make it suit the virtual.
Yeah, I mean, very, very seldom do people actually watch porn because they're horny as such. They go to porn because they're bored, because they can't get to sleep, because they need to pick me up in the morning, because they're anxious. We even turn to it just to celebrate, and it becomes a companion in all things that will save us from, as you say, the mundane. It's really, really good, really good. I have to start winding down, but I think you just blew my world apart a little bit, and I'm really glad this is recorded so I can go back and listen to it. I feel so apprehensive to end there. This just means you have to come back on at some point, because we've talked about what a broken humanity looks like, like because we can see it all around us, like So any psychiatrist will tell you that when it comes to anxiety and depression, it's a fear. These are fear dominated pathologies that just wreck us, and it's always about the possibilities, like the lack of control. And the virtual world allows us to act like we're God. We act like we're in control, and so we can look everywhere. I can look inside my own heart and be like, okay, I know what a society that starts with possibility and never actually gets to the actual, but with all my heart I want to live here, like I don't want to live in time, I want to live in the moment. I don't want to be talking. I want to be able to talk to my mom and be present to her because she's precious to me. I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to try and run away because I have obligations and I'm busy. It's like, bro, like, how many more years will you have her? She's your mom. Like, nothing else is more important than just being with your mom. So like, I like, that's so much more human to me. And with all my heart, I want that. I want to be safe for the women around me. I want to be integrous for the men around me. And so like, we've done a really good job of looking at a broken humanity, and we can all imagine quite easily what a broken culture looks like, a culture that's oriented around this metaphysic that you're talking about. But I would love to have you on sometime to explore together let's use the word actual humanity looks like, where we're actually being present and we're seeing each other, and we're hugging and we're listening. How about that? Just the practice of listening is a spiritual formation that I've been on for like 10 years and I'm still so bad at it. So bad at it.
It's going to be something that we'll have to do over the course of our lifetimes. Maybe, right? But that, I think, probably to end off, what you said about the use of the word present is an important one. One of the things about the world we live in, of which pornography is a very intense manifestation of, is that it breeds a lack of attention, a lack of presence, right? We are actually not present, not just simply because it's virtual, but that it's encouraging us to chase the next thrill. Right? And when, insofar as our attention is always geared towards the next thing, we are never going to be present. Right? And I think presence is going to be that. It's going to be that anchor, I suppose. Right? And it's a training that we are actually going to need very desperately.
Yes. Yes. It was a big moment for me when I realized that a lot of my anxiety, because I'd struggled for years with anxiety, that a lot of my anxiety is due to me running from the moments behind me earlier in the day that I wasn't present in, and running towards as salvation the moments that were ahead of me, but never actually living just now. like just now, and being okay with the now, knowing Jesus in the now, and knowing his gospel, his good news in the here and now. So, so I love all of that. I am going to wind it down. We always ask 2 questions at the end. One, Matthew, how can people track with you? If people want to read your thoughts, how could they do that? And then 2, how can we be praying for you?
Okay. So you can find me on the internet. You can find me on Twitter at Asian Theologian. You can also find me on my blog, which is www.awkwardasiantheologian.com. That's where you can find my thoughts in long form there, and then on Twitter in less long form. In terms of prayer, I am going to need so much prayer in my new role out in Wagga Wagga. It is something that I haven't done before, and like all things that I haven't done before, it makes me nervous. And a part of me is always doubtful as to whether I'm up to the job. So if you could pray for me that that God be present as I undertake this new role, that will be great.
Amen. Well, you've been a gift to us. Thank you for coming and just sharing yourself with us, sharing the things that Jesus has poured into you and the ways he's challenged you. Thank you for challenging us.
No, thank you for inviting me. This has been wonderful. I would love to come back again if the opportunity is there.
Absolutely. I would love it. I enjoy your company quite a bit and find you almost too stimulating when it comes to conversation. So thank you for all of that, Matthew. Thank you for being with us.
Not a worry. Thank you so much for having me.
For sure. Guys, thank you for sitting in. Thank you for hanging with us. I hope that was helpful. At the end of the day, it's just learning how to follow Jesus and how to be present. There's a lot that demands our attention. And what does it look like to actually give the people and the things in front of us our attention, and to be integrous about it, to just be present, with all my heart. That's what I want. So I hope this is beneficial to you. If you enjoyed it, share it with a fellow nerd. Subscribe, continue to track with us. Comments are always welcome. Share your thoughts for sure. Guys, we'll check you next time. This is The Naked Gospel, and have a good night.